The vibration started in the soles of his shoes. It wasn't the rhythmic thrum of the Rolls-Royce engines that Elias had known by heart for 20 years. This was different. It was a jagged, high-frequency shudder, like a violin string pulled too tight, singing through the aluminum floor beams of the Airbus A350. Elias didn't look up. He didn't look around. He kept his eyes on the small, pink, glittery backpack resting on the tray table of seat 8A. Inside the window seat, his daughter, Maya, was asleep. Her breathing was a soft, rhythmic counterpoint to the hum of the cabin. She was 6 years old, and she had slept through the takeoff, the meal service, and the turbulence over the Atlantic. Her head rested heavily on Elias's left bicep. He hadn't moved his arm in 4 hours. The muscle was cramping, a dull ache radiating into his shoulder, but he kept it perfectly still. He turned the page of his paperback with his right hand. He wasn't reading. He was listening. The cabin was dark. Most window shades were drawn. The blue ambient lighting of the business class cabin cast long, ghostly shadows across the aisle. HZZZT. There it was again. A micro-interruption in the airflow. A sound that shouldn't exist in a pressurized tube at 38,000 feet. 2 rows ahead, in 6C, a man in a tailored charcoal suit was typing aggressively on a laptop. Across the aisle, a woman in a silk sleep mask shifted restlessly. Elias shifted his gaze to the floor. He watched the surface of the water in the plastic cup on his tray. The water wasn't rippling. It was trembling, a pattern of concentric circles that appeared, held for 3 seconds, and vanished. Elias closed his book. He placed it gently in his seat pocket. He reached over and adjusted the blanket around Maya's shoulders, tucking it under her chin. She let out a small sigh, burrowing deeper into his side. A flight attendant, a young woman with a tight bun and tired eyes, walked down the aisle collecting empty glasses. She moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this 1,000 times. She didn't hear the sound. She didn't feel the floor. Elias watched her pass. He saw her pause at row 9, the row directly behind him. "Sir," she whispered, "are you all right?" Elias didn't turn his head, but he angled his vision. The passenger in 9A, a heavy-set man who had ordered 3 cognacs before the meal service, was breathing audibly. It was a wet, ragged sound. "Sir," the attendant repeated, her voice pitching up a fraction. Hot," the man in 9A slurred. His voice was thick, like his tongue was too big for his mouth. "Turn off the heat. The cabin temperature is set to standard, sir. Can I get you some water?" "It's burning my feet," the man groaned. He kicked at the bulkhead in front of him, the back of Elias's seat. The impact was dull, absorbed by the padding. Elias didn't flinch. He placed his hand gently on Maya's ear, shielding her from the noise. He waited. The vibration in the floor increased. It wasn't just the sound now. It was a temperature gradient. Elias could feel a localized warmth radiating through the carpet, seeping into the leather of his shoe. The flight attendant signaled for backup. A moment later, the purser, a stern woman named Karen, arrived. They spoke in hushed, urgent tones. "He's disoriented," the younger one whispered. "Possible intoxication." "Cut him off," Karen said softly. "Get him some water. Monitor him." They were diagnosing a behavioral problem. Elias knew it was a systemic one. He looked at the control panel on the armrest of his seat. The small green LED indicating the power outlet status was flickering. Not blinking, flickering. An arc fault. Somewhere in the thousands of miles of wiring beneath the floorboards, insulation had been breached. A current was jumping where it shouldn't, finding a path through resistance. Resistance created heat. The man in 9A wasn't drunk. He was cooking. Elias checked Maya again. She was safe for the moment. The heat was localized behind them. But smoke would be next. And on an airplane, smoke was the end of the world. He considered pressing his call button. He looked at the uniform of the purser, the way she stood with her arms crossed, her posture defensive. He looked at his own reflection in the darkened window, a broad-shouldered black man in a faded hoodie, holding a sleeping child. He knew how that conversation would go. He would explain about the arc fault. They would ask him how he knew. He would try to explain he was a senior grid integrity analyst for the city of Chicago, that he spent his life listening to currents in the dark. They would ask him to lower his voice. They would tell him to calm down. They would waste 3 minutes verifying his claim while the wire insulation smoldered into an open flame. He stayed silent. He unbuckled his seatbelt. Sir, please keep your seatbelt fastened while the sign is on, the younger attendant said as she passed him. Elias nodded once, compliant, and clicked the buckle back into place. He didn't argue. He just needed her to move away. Behind him, the situation in 9A escalated. The man let out a shout, a garbled cry of pain. My legs. It's biting me. Passengers were waking up now. Heads popped up over the privacy dividers. The man in the charcoal suit turned around, annoyed. Hey, keep it down back there. Sir, you need to stay in your seat, the purser ordered, her voice losing its customer service sheen. It's hot. The man in 9A scrambled, trying to climb over the aisle passenger. He was panic-stricken, flailing. He fell into the aisle, collapsing with a heavy thud. The cabin erupted in low-level panic. Medical, the purser shouted. We need a medical kit. The intercom chimed. A moment later, the captain's voice filled the cabin. It was calm, authoritative, the voice of a man who believed he was in control of the variables. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a passenger requiring medical assistance. If there is a licensed physician or paramedic on board, please identify yourself to the cabin crew immediately. Silence followed. Then, the rustle of movement. 3 rows ahead, a tall, silver-haired man stood up. He adjusted his glasses, looking grave and important. I'm a cardiologist, he announced to the room. Thank you, doctor. Please, come this way, the purser said, relief washing over her face. The doctor moved down the aisle. A second man stood up from 4D. I'm an EMT, he said, following the doctor. The captain's voice came back on. We also asked that all other passengers remain seated to allow the medical team space to work. Elias sat perfectly still. He watched the doctor kneel beside the man in the aisle. He's diaphoretic, the doctor said, touching the man's forehead. Rapid pulse. He's confused. Could be cardiac event or a stroke. Get the defibrillator, the doctor ordered. And oxygen. Elias's eyes narrowed. Oxygen. Pure, pressurized oxygen. Delivered to a man lying on a carpet that was currently sitting on top of a thermal runaway. If they opened the oxygen tank and the frayed wiring sparked again, which it would, given the vibration, the stream of oxygen would turn the smoldering carpet into a blowtorch. It wouldn't just be a fire. It would be an incineration. The flight attendant ran to the bulkhead to grab the AED and the portable oxygen cylinder. Elias looked at Maya. She murmured in her sleep, her hand twitching against his chest. He had to move, but he couldn't leave her, and he couldn't stand up and shout. Shouting created chaos. Chaos delayed action. He gently, impossibly slowly, slid his arm out from under Maya's head. He replaced his arm with the airline pillow. She stirred, frowned, but didn't wake. Elias didn't stand up. Instead, he slid out of his seat, crouching low. He moved not like a hero, but like a mechanic. He bypassed the gathering crowd in the aisle by stepping into the empty space of the galley kitchenette, avoiding the doctor's line of sight. Sir, you need to sit down. The younger flight attendant saw him. She was holding the oxygen tank. Elias stopped. He looked her in the eye. He didn't raise his hands. He didn't look aggressive. He looked tired. Don't open that tank, Elias said. His voice was a low rumble, barely audible over the engines. Excuse me. She blinked, startled by his tone. It wasn't a request. The passenger isn't sick, Elias said. The floor is electrified. There's a short in the seat power supply unit under 9A. If you open that oxygen, you will kill everyone on this plane. The attendant stared at him. Sir, please return to your seat. The doctor is treating a symptom, Elias said. He took a step closer, crowding her space, but not touching her. He pointed to the floor near the collapsed man's feet. Look at the carpet. She looked. A thin, gray wisp of smoke was curling up from the seam where the seat track met the floor. It was almost invisible in the dark cabin, but once pointed out, it was undeniable. Her eyes went wide. The AD, Elias said. Tell the doctor not to shock him. The attendant froze. The training manual in her head was conflicting with the reality in front of her. Now Elias said. She turned and ran back to the group. Doctor, wait. No shock. The doctor looked up, paddles in hand. What? He's going into arrest. Fire, she whispered, pointing at the smoke which was now thickening, turning black. We have fire. Panic spiked in the aisle. The doctor scrambled back. The man on the floor groaned, clutching his legs. The captain's voice returned, tighter this time. Cabin crew report. The purser grabbed the interphone. "Captain, we have smoke in the cabin. Row 9. Extinguishers," someone yelled. Elias didn't wait for the crew to fumble with the halon extinguishers. They were trained to fight fires, but they didn't know where the power was coming from. You can't put out an electrical fire if the juice is still running. He moved past the frozen attendant. He moved past the doctor who was staring at the smoke in horror. He didn't go to the fire. He went to the galley panel. The Airbus A350 galley control panel was a complex array of touchscreens and breakers. Elias didn't know the specific layout of this aircraft, but he knew logic. He knew that commercial power grids were segmented. He scanned the breakers behind the translucent plastic guard. Galley power, IFE server. Seat power FWD, seat power mid. "Hey, what are you doing?" The purser lunged for him. "You can't touch that." Elias blocked her arm with his forearm. He didn't shove her. He just created a wall. "I'm killing the circuit," he said. "Security," the purser screamed. "I have a passenger interfering with flight controls." The able-bodied men the captain had asked for earlier, the ones who hadn't stood up, were now unbuckling. 2 large men from row 4 started rushing toward the galley. They saw a black man in a hoodie messing with the plane's electronics while a flight attendant screamed. They didn't see a father. They saw a threat. Elias had 3 seconds. He found the breaker labeled ISBS, in seat power supply. It wasn't a switch, it was a pop-out button. But the master kill switch was behind a red guard. He flipped the guard. The first man grabbed Elias by the shoulder, wrenching him back. "Get off that." Elias didn't fight back. He used the momentum of the pull. As he was yanked backward, he kept his finger hooked on the master breaker switch and slammed it down. Plunk. A heavy mechanical relay sound echoed through the floor. Instantly, the blue ambient lights died. The cabin plunged into darkness. The screens went black. The hum of the ventilation shifted pitch as the load dropped. "He shut off the plane," someone screamed. "Get him down." The 2 men tackled Elias, pinning him to the galley floor. His face was pressed into the industrial carpet. A knee dug into his spine. He didn't struggle. He didn't shout, "I saved you." He just lay there, limp, conserving his oxygen. "Hold him. Someone get the cuffs." The cabin was in chaos. Flashlights clicked on. "The smoke." The doctor's voice cut through the noise. "The smoke is stopping." The flight attendant with the extinguisher was aiming at the base of seat 9A. It's dying down," she coughed. "There's no flame. The heat is dissipating." The purser shone her heavy flashlight at the floor. The wisp of smoke had thinned. The angry red glow that had started to eat through the carpet fibers was fading to a dull gray. "The power is off," the doctor said, realizing. "The source is cut." The cabin fell into a stunned silence. The only sound was the wind rushing over the wings and the heavy breathing of the men on top of Elias. "Let him up," a voice said. It wasn't the purser. It was the captain. He had come out of the cockpit, an emergency axe in one hand, a smoke hood around his neck. He looked at the scene. The smoke trail ending at row 9. The dark control panel. The man pinned on the floor. The 2 passengers hesitated, looking at the captain for confirmation. "I said let him up," the captain repeated, his voice like cold steel. The men scrambled off Elias. Elias rolled over slowly. He adjusted his hoodie. He checked his watch. He didn't look at the captain. He looked down the aisle, towards seat 8A. In the beam of a flashlight, he saw Maya. She was sitting up now, rubbing her eyes, looking around the dark cabin with confused, fearful eyes. "Daddy," she whimpered. Elias stood up. He brushed the lint off his knees. He ignored the captain. He ignored the men who had tackled him. He ignored the doctor. He walked past them all. "Daddy," Maya cried out, tears starting to form. "I'm here, baby," Elias said softly. He reached seat 8A and sat down. The darkness of the cabin was heavy, but the air was clearing. He pulled the blanket up over her. "Why is it dark?" she asked. "Just a fuse, baby," he whispered, kissing her forehead. "Just a broken fuse. Go back to sleep." He felt the eyes of the entire cabin on him. The purser was standing in the aisle, hand over her mouth, looking from the scorched carpet to the quiet man in 8A. The heroes who had tackled him were shuffling awkwardly, staring at their shoes. The captain walked down the aisle. He stopped at row 8. He looked at the scorched wiring that was now visible where the carpet had melted away, inches from the main fuel line junction that ran through the fuselage keel. If that arc had continued for 30 more seconds, It would have breached the line. The captain looked at Elias. Elias was opening his paperback book again, though it was too dark to read. He was using the book as a shield, a signal that he was done. The captain took a breath to speak. He wanted to thank him. He wanted to apologize. He wanted to ask how he knew. Elias turned his head slightly. He met the captain's gaze. His eyes were dark, tired, and utterly flat. He raised one finger to his lips. Shoo. He pointed to his daughter. She's sleeping. The captain stood there for a long moment. He understood. This wasn't a moment for a speech. It wasn't a moment for a handshake or a round of applause. The system had failed. The man had fixed it. The transaction was complete. The captain gave a sharp, respectful nod. He turned to the purser. Get the auxiliary lights on, and get this gentleman whatever he needs. I don't need anything, Elias said quietly, his attention already back on the rhythmic rise and fall of Maya's chest. Just get us to Chicago. The captain returned to the cockpit. The lights flickered back on, dim and amber. The flight continued. Elias didn't sleep. He sat in the dark, his hand resting on his daughter's shoulder, feeling the vibration of the plane. It was smooth now. The jagged shutter was gone. He poured a new cup of water. The surface was glass still. He drank it and turned the page.